Through the ancient wisdom of Buddhism and the teachings of the Tao, we discover a profound truth about existence. Life is not a battle to be won, but a river to be navigated. The Buddha understood that resistance to reality creates suffering, while alignment with the natural flow of existence brings liberation. When we cling desperately to the banks of certainty, struggling against the current of change, we exhaust ourselves in futile resistance. Yet when we release our grip and surrender to the movement of life itself, we discover an effortless grace, a natural intelligence that carries us exactly where we need to be. This is not passivity or resignation, but rather a deep attunement to the wisdom that flows through all things. Consider for a moment the nature of water. It never fights against the rocks in its path, never demands that the landscape conform to its expectations. Instead, water flows around obstacles, finds the path of least resistance, and ultimately shapes even the hardest stone through gentle persistence. This is the essence of what the Taoists called Wu Wei, or effortless action. It represents a state of sincere action, where our behavior aligns with the natural way, removing the social and conceptual character from our movements and acting from natural instinct or intuition. The Buddha taught us something remarkably similar through the concept of impermanence, or anicca. All conditioned things are transient, evanescent, and inconstant, coming into being and dissolving in an endless dance of change. When we truly internalize this understanding, we stop fighting against the fundamental nature of existence and begin to move with it. The invitation before us today is radical in its simplicity. What if living well means learning to flow rather than fight? What if peace arrives not through controlling every circumstance, but through releasing our desperate need for control? In the teachings that follow, we will explore 6 profound ways to align ourselves with the natural current of life, drawing from the depths of Buddhist insight and Taoist wisdom. These are not techniques to master or achievements to accumulate, but rather perspectives to cultivate, ways of seeing that transform how we meet each moment. As we journey together through these teachings, remember that understanding flows not from intellectual grasping, but from direct experience. Let these words be seeds planted in the soil of your awareness, trusting that wisdom will blossom in its own time, in its own way. Let go of your ego, discovering the river within. The ego is perhaps the greatest obstacle to flowing with life. It is the voice that insists you are separate, fixed, and fundamentally different from the world around you. It clings to labels, identities, and roles as if they were solid ground, building an entire fortress of I am statements that must be defended at all costs. I am a manager. I am successful. I am respected. I am someone who never fails. These declarations become the walls of a prison we construct for ourselves, brick by brick, limiting who we can become and how freely we can move through life. The Buddha's teaching of anatta, or non-self, strikes at the very heart of this illusion. Anatta is the doctrine that no unchanging, permanent self exists and is the absence of essence in any phenomenon. This doesn't mean you cease to exist or that your experiences aren't real. Rather, it points to a profound truth. What you call yourself is actually a flowing process, not a fixed entity. You are not a rock, solid and unchanging. You are a river, flowing, moving, alive, with waters that are never the same from moment to moment. Think deeply about the roles and identities you've wrapped around yourself like armor. Perhaps you've defined yourself by your career achievements, believing that your worth rises and falls with your professional success. Maybe you've tied your identity to your physical appearance, your intelligence, your relationships, or your possessions. But observe what happens when these external markers shift, as they inevitably do. The promotion doesn't materialize. Age changes your appearance. Relationships transform or end. Suddenly, the ground beneath the ego trembles, and suffering arises from this attachment to a phantom. The wisdom traditions point us toward a deeper truth. By seeing ourselves for what we really are, bundles of ever-changing processes, we can undermine anxiety and live more peaceful lives. When you release the need to defend and protect a fixed self-image, something extraordinary happens. You become fluid, adaptable, responsive to life rather than reactive against it. You discover that you are not separate from the greater whole, but intimately woven into the fabric of existence itself. Consider the Zen teaching: when I let go of what I am, I become what I might be. This is not about destroying your personality or becoming a blank slate. It's about loosening your grip on rigid self-definitions that no longer serve you. Who might you become if you weren't constantly trying to prove you're the person you think you should be? What creative possibilities would open if you stopped defending outdated versions of yourself? Without the burden of ego, we become more compassionate. Without the pressure to protect a fixed identity, we become more flexible, creative, and alive. This is the paradox of letting go. In releasing your desperate grip on who you think you are, you discover the freedom to become who you truly are. The river of your authentic being can finally flow without the dams and diversions created by ego attachment. In meditation, we practice this letting go directly. As thoughts arise claiming "I am this" or "this is mine," we simply observe them as passing phenomena, no more solid than clouds drifting across the sky. We notice how the mind constantly constructs narratives about self, and in that noticing, we gain space from the construction. This space is freedom. This space is where life can flow through us, unimpeded by the rigid structures of ego. Be humble. Learning from the sea's wisdom, the ancient Taoist masters observed nature with profound attention, and from their observations came teachings of timeless wisdom. One such teaching speaks to the power of humility. Water flows to the sea because the sea is lower than all rivers. The ocean achieves its greatness not by standing above all things, but by positioning itself below. It receives everything that flows downward, and in this receptivity, it becomes vast and full. This is the teaching known as "dare not to be first." It challenges everything our competitive culture tells us about success and achievement. We're taught to strive for the top position, to assert dominance, to ensure we're recognized and rewarded before others. But this constant striving for primacy creates tension, separation, and exhaustion. It puts us at odds with the natural flow of life, constantly pushing upstream against a current that would gladly carry us if only we would let it. Humility, in the Buddhist understanding, is not self-deprecation or false modesty. It is the clear recognition of interconnectedness, the understanding that nothing exists independently. All physical and mental events come into being through dependent origination, arising, changing, and disappearing in relationship to countless causes and conditions. You did not create yourself from nothing. Every breath you take is a gift from plants that produce oxygen. Every thought you think emerges from language you learned from others. Every skill you possess was developed through the teaching and support of countless people whose names you may not even remember. Consider your achievements, the things you take pride in. Look deeper, and you'll find that not one of them was accomplished in isolation. Your education was provided by teachers who dedicated their lives to learning and sharing knowledge. Your livelihood exists within systems created by generations before you. Even your capacity for independent thought was nurtured by parents, mentors, friends, and experiences that shaped your consciousness. As the teaching says, no one is self-made. We depend utterly on the web of interconnection. When we truly understand this, the need to be first, to stand above others, naturally falls away. We see ourselves as part of a vast ecosystem of mutual support and interdependence. Our accomplishments belong not just to us, but to the entire network of causes and conditions that made them possible. This recognition doesn't diminish our efforts. It actually enriches our appreciation for life itself. Humility also protects us from the suffering that comes with ego inflation. When we believe ourselves to be the sole author of our success, we become brittle, defensive, afraid of failure. Every setback becomes a personal indictment. But when we recognize that all achievement emerges from interconnected causes, failure loses its personal sting. We can learn, adjust, and continue without the crushing weight of damaged pride. The Sea's wisdom teaches us that true power comes not from elevation, but from depth, not from standing out, but from being present at the foundation, ready to receive, to support, to nourish. When you dare not to be first, you position yourself where life naturally flows. You become like the valley that receives water, the fertile soil that nurtures seeds, the space that allows all things to arise and pass in their own time. This is not weakness, but profound strength, the strength of one who has learned to work with, rather than against, the fundamental patterns of existence. 3. Don't rush things. The art of wu-wei. In our hyperactive world, we've been conditioned to believe that more effort always produces better results. We push, strive, and force outcomes, convinced that success belongs to those who never rest. But this approach often creates more problems than it solves, leaving us exhausted, anxious, and paradoxically less effective. The Taoist concept of wu-wei offers a radical alternative to this frantic way of living. Wu-wei, often translated as non-action or effortless action, means letting things happen the way they happen, not how you want them to happen. It means letting go of certain expectations and outcomes, ceasing to act against the natural current of life. This doesn't mean doing nothing or becoming passive. Rather, it means acting in harmony with the natural rhythms and timing of situations, moving with, rather than against, the grain of reality. Consider the simple act of falling asleep. The more desperately you try to force sleep to come, the more it eludes you. Your very effort creates the conditions that prevent rest. But when you stop trying, when you simply lie down and allow your body to do what it naturally does, sleep arrives on its own. This is wu-wei in action, the wisdom of non-interference with natural processes. Wu-wei is closely connected to the Taoist reverence for the natural world, for it means striving to make our behavior as spontaneous and inevitable as certain natural processes. A seed doesn't struggle to become a flower. It simply unfolds according to its nature when the conditions are right. A river doesn't force its way to the ocean. It follows the path of least resistance and arrives perfectly. Birds don't strategize their migration. They respond to internal and external cues with natural intelligence. In our lives, wu-wei invites us to distinguish between productive action and anxious forcing, Productive action emerges from clear seeing and natural response. When you're genuinely hungry, eating happens effortlessly. When you understand a subject deeply, teaching flows naturally. When you love someone authentically, kind words and gestures arise without calculation. This is action aligned with reality, and it happens with a quality of ease that no amount of forced effort can produce. But anxious forcing comes from a different place. It emerges when we're attached to specific outcomes, when we're operating from fear rather than wisdom, when we're trying to impose our will on situations that have their own nature and timing. We push someone to love us who isn't ready. We rush a project that needs more reflection. We attempt to change someone who needs to change themselves. And in all this forcing, we create resistance, tension, and ultimately suffering. Wu Wei emphasizes working smart over working hard, allowing tasks to unfold naturally and effortlessly, bringing enhanced efficiency, reduced stress, and greater creativity. This might seem counterintuitive in our achievement-obsessed culture, but consider your own experience. When have you done your best work? Often it's when you were relaxed, when you had given a problem space to breathe, when you stopped trying so hard and allowed your natural intelligence to engage. The practice of Wu Wei requires patience, trust, and deep listening. It asks you to pay attention to the actual conditions of a situation rather than imposing your preferred timeline. Some things require time to mature. Some processes unfold at their own pace. Seeds need seasons to grow, not just days. Relationships deepen through patient presence, not forced intimacy. Understanding arrives in its own time, not through mental straining. We should be like water, which is submissive and weak, yet can't be surpassed for attacking what is hard and strong. Through gentle persistence and compliance with the specific shape of a problem, an obstacle can be worked around and gradually eroded. This is the essence of effortless power, not the brittle strength of forced will, but the fluid effectiveness of aligned action. When you stop rushing, you discover that life has its own intelligence, its own perfect timing. You begin to sense when to act and when to wait, when to speak and when to remain silent, when to push forward and when to step back. This sensing doesn't come from thinking or planning. It arises from presence, from being fully here and responsive to what is actually happening rather than what you wish were happening. See. Embrace change. Dancing with impermanence. Change is the most fundamental characteristic of existence, yet we spend enormous energy trying to prevent it, deny it, or escape from it. We want security, permanence, and solid ground beneath our feet. But the Buddha's teaching of impermanence reveals a profound truth. There is no solid ground. Everything is flowing, transforming, arising and passing in an endless dance of change. Impermanence underscores the dynamic and changing nature of reality. All phenomena, including our bodies and our thoughts, are the result of causes and conditions and are subject to change, decay, and death. Your body changes moment by moment, cells dying and being born, organs processing and transforming. Your thoughts arise and dissolve like waves on the ocean, none of them lasting more than a few seconds. Your emotions shift from joy to sorrow to anger to peace in the course of a single conversation. Nothing stays the same. Nothing can be held in place. For most people, this reality creates anxiety and fear. We cling desperately to what is pleasant, trying to make it permanent. We push away what is unpleasant, hoping to escape it forever. But both strategies fail because they're based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how reality works. Because of impermanence, desires for or attachments to objects cause suffering. As long as there is attachment to things that are unstable, unreliable, changing, and impermanent, there will be suffering when they change, when they cease to be what we want them to be. But here's the profound wisdom. The same impermanence that seems threatening is actually the source of all possibility, all hope, all transformation. Without change, there could be no growth, no healing, no awakening. You'd be stuck in every bad habit forever. Every mistake you ever made would define you. Suffering would be eternal. Impermanence means that no matter how difficult your current situation, it will change. No matter how trapped you feel, new possibilities will emerge. No matter how deeply you're suffering, healing is possible because nothing remains the same. Consider the wisdom in the saying, "New beginnings are often disguised as painful endings." The job loss that devastates you opens the door to a career more aligned with your values. The relationship that ends creates space for deeper self-understanding and eventually more authentic connection. The identity you outgrow must die so that a more mature self can emerge. Every ending is also a beginning. Every loss makes room for gain. Every death contains the seeds of rebirth. By understanding that everything is transient, we are less likely to cling to possessions, status, relationships, or even our own self-concept, leading to greater freedom and less suffering. This doesn't mean we stop caring about people or things. Rather, we learn to love without grasping, to enjoy without clinging, to appreciate without trying to freeze moments in time. We hold everything lightly, knowing that the nature of form is to change form. Water demonstrates this wisdom perfectly. Pour water into a cup, and it becomes the shape of the cup. Pour it into a bowl, and it adapts to the bowl. Freeze it, and it becomes ice. Heat it, and it becomes steam. At every stage, water remains essentially itself, while completely adapting to changing conditions. It doesn't resist transformation, it embodies it. This is the art of embracing change. Meditation practice trains us to observe impermanence directly. We watch thoughts arise and pass like clouds. We notice how sensations in the body constantly shift and change. We observe how emotions peak and then subside. Through this observation, we develop a visceral understanding that clinging to any experience is futile. Everything is already passing away even as we grasp for it. This understanding brings tremendous liberation. When we stop demanding that life remain unchanged, we can finally meet it as it is. We can appreciate beauty without fearing its loss. We can love deeply without possessiveness. We can pursue goals without attachment to specific outcomes. We become like dancers moving gracefully with a partner, responsive to every shift and turn, trusting the music of change itself. The practice is this: whenever you notice yourself resisting change, pause and breathe. Feel the resistance in your body as tension, tightness, contraction. Then ask yourself, what if this change is not a problem, but an invitation? What if letting go of the old chapter is how I open the next one? What if transformation is not something to fear, but the very essence of life itself? In this questioning, the grip of resistance loosens, and you discover your capacity to flow with whatever comes. 5. Be content with little. The wealth of simplicity. We live in a culture that constantly tells us we don't have enough. Not enough money, not enough status, not enough possessions, not enough achievement. The advertising industry exists to manufacture dissatisfaction, to convince us that happiness lies just beyond our current circumstances, in the next purchase, the next promotion, the next milestone. This endless pursuit of more creates a fundamental restlessness that prevents us from ever truly arriving, ever really being at peace. The Buddha identified craving as one of the root causes of suffering. Not the natural desire for food when hungry or warmth when cold, but the compulsive grasping that's never satisfied, always reaching for something else, something more. This grasping keeps us perpetually caught in a cycle of wanting, getting, briefly enjoying, and then wanting again. We're like people drinking salt water to quench our thirst, each drink only intensifying the craving for more. But there is another way, a radical path that our culture barely acknowledges, the way of contentment. Contentment doesn't mean settling for mediocrity or abandoning all aspiration. Rather, it means discovering that happiness doesn't come from accumulating more, but from appreciating what already is. It means recognizing that you already have everything essential for a good life. Look around you right now. You have eyes to see these words, which means you're not blind. You have a mind capable of understanding, which means you're not lost in severe mental illness or dementia. You have shelter, or you wouldn't be reading this. You have food available, or you wouldn't have survived to this moment. These simple facts, which we take utterly for granted, are actually extraordinary blessings that billions of people throughout history have desperately wished for. The practice of gratitude transforms our relationship with what we have. Instead of constantly measuring ourselves against others on social media, comparing and despairing, we can turn our attention to the miracle of ordinary existence, the warmth of sunlight on your skin, the satisfaction of a simple meal when you're hungry, the comfort of clean water, the joy of a conversation with someone you care about. These experiences, free and available, contain more genuine happiness than luxury could ever provide. Simplicity creates space for what matters. When we're not constantly acquiring, organizing, maintaining, and worrying about possessions, we have energy for relationships, for creativity, for presence. When we're not endlessly scrolling through others' highlight reels, we can actually live our own lives. When we're not pursuing the next achievement to prove our worth, we can discover that our worth was never in question. The wisdom traditions teach us to examine our needs honestly. What do we actually need to live well? Much less than we think. Food, water, shelter, basic health, meaningful connection, and purposeful engagement with life. Beyond these essentials, most of what we chase is manufactured desire, cultural conditioning masquerading as necessity. There's a beautiful freedom in realizing you have enough. Suddenly, the anxiety about keeping up evaporates. The comparison game loses its power. The desperate striving for more can finally cease. You discover that contentment is not a destination to reach after acquiring certain things. It's a way of seeing available right now, with exactly what you already have. This doesn't mean we become passive or stop growing, but our growth emerges from genuine interest and natural development, rather than from a sense of lack. We pursue things because they're meaningful, not because we need them to feel complete. We share our gifts because it's our nature to contribute, not because we're trying to prove our value. Stop comparing yourself with others. Their journey is not yours. Their struggles and blessings are different from yours. When you measure your insides against others' outsides, you create unnecessary suffering. Instead, measure your life by your own values. Are you growing in wisdom? Are you treating others with kindness? Are you living with integrity? Are you present to the beauty that surrounds you? The path to contentment begins with a simple practice. Each day, Name 3 things you're grateful for. Not grand things necessarily, but simple blessings. The health that allows you to move through your day. The friend who listens when you need to talk. The cup of tea that warms your hands on a cold morning. Through this practice, you train your mind to notice sufficiency rather than lack, abundance rather than scarcity. 6. Accept your flaws. The freedom of self. Compassion. Perhaps the most liberating discovery on the spiritual path is this: you don't need to be perfect to be lovable. You don't need to fix every flaw before you deserve peace. You don't need others' approval to confirm your worth. These beliefs, which drive so much human suffering, are built on a fundamental misunderstanding of what it means to be human. The teaching says, when you accept yourself, the whole world accepts you. This isn't magical thinking, but a profound psychological and spiritual truth. When you're at war with yourself, constantly criticizing, judging, and rejecting parts of who you are, you project that rejection outward. You assume others are judging you as harshly as you judge yourself. You interpret neutral expressions as disapproval, innocent comments as criticism. You live in a state of defensive vigilance, always protecting yourself from attacks that mostly exist in your mind. But when you practice genuine self-acceptance, something shifts in your entire relationship with the world. You stop seeking validation because you've given it to yourself. You stop trying to be someone else because you're comfortable being who you are. And paradoxically, this self-acceptance actually makes you more attractive, more magnetic, because people sense your ease, your groundedness, your lack of desperate need. Buddhism teaches us about the middle way, which applies beautifully to self-relationship. One extreme is self-hatred, constantly berating ourselves for not being good enough. The other extreme is arrogant ego inflation, believing ourselves superior to others. The middle way is compassionate self-awareness, seeing ourselves clearly, acknowledging both strengths and weaknesses, without harsh judgment or defensive denial. Your flaws are not obstacles to liberation, they're part of the path. Every weakness you have offers an opportunity for compassion, first toward yourself and then toward others who struggle similarly. When you accept your own impatience, you can be patient with others' impatience. When you acknowledge your own fear, you can hold space for others' fear without judgment. Your imperfections connect you to the human family rather than separating you from it. The obsession with perfection creates a terrible prison. You become afraid to try new things because you might fail. You hide your authentic self because it might not be impressive enough. You exhaust yourself maintaining an image that doesn't even reflect who you really are. And for what? For the approval of others who are mostly too busy worrying about their own flaws to spend much time thinking about yours. Consider how much energy you've wasted trying to be someone you're not. Think about the mask you wear in different situations, the performance of perfection that leaves you depleted. What if you could drop that mask? What if you could show up as you actually are, flawed and human and real? The fear is that people will reject you. But often the opposite happens. When you dare to be authentic, others feel permission to be authentic too, and genuine connection becomes possible. Self-acceptance doesn't mean you never work on yourself or grow, but the growth comes from a different place. Instead of changing yourself because you're not good enough, you evolve naturally from self-love and curiosity. You develop not to prove your worth, but because growth is inherently satisfying. You address habits that cause suffering not from self-loathing, but from compassion for yourself and others. The practice begins with noticing the voice of self-criticism when it arises. that harsh internal judge who tells you you're not smart enough, attractive enough, successful enough, that you should have done better, been more. Instead of believing everything this voice says, simply observe it. Notice how it creates tension in your body, contraction in your heart. Then try speaking to yourself as you would to a beloved friend who's struggling. I see you're having a hard time. It makes sense that you feel this way. You're doing the best you can with what you know. You are enough, exactly as you are. These words might feel false at first, especially if you've spent years believing the opposite. But with practice, compassionate self-talk becomes natural, and slowly you internalize a kinder relationship with yourself. You discover that you don't need to be perfect to be valuable, flawless to be lovable, extraordinary to be worthy. When you finally accept yourself, you stop living for applause. You make choices based on your values rather than others' expectations. You pursue what genuinely matters to you rather than what impresses others. And ironically, this authenticity often brings more genuine admiration than performing ever did, because people can sense when someone is comfortable in their own skin, when someone has made peace with being human. Closing reflection. The journey back to flow. We began by contemplating life as a river, and now we can see more clearly what this metaphor truly means. The river doesn't flow because it tries hard or forces its way. It flows because that is its nature. It moves through valleys and over rocks, through gentle stretches and turbulent rapids, always remaining essentially itself, while constantly adapting to changing conditions. This is the wisdom we've explored through these 6 practices. Letting go of ego, embracing humility, practicing effortless action, welcoming change, finding contentment, and accepting ourselves as we are. Each of these teachings points toward the same fundamental insight. Suffering comes from resistance, and peace comes from alignment. When we fight against reality, demanding that life conform to our preferences, we exhaust ourselves and create unnecessary pain. But when we learn to work with reality, moving with its currents rather than against them, we discover a natural ease, a flowing grace that carries us through both joy and sorrow with greater equanimity. This doesn't mean we become passive or stop caring about what happens. Rather, we engage with life from a different place, from wisdom rather than fear, from presence rather than grasping. We act when action is called for, but we don't force what cannot be forced. We care deeply about others, but we don't try to control their journeys. We pursue meaningful goals, but we hold the outcomes lightly, knowing that life often has better plans than our limited vision can perceive. The path of flow requires practice, patience, and trust. You won't master it overnight, because mastery itself is a form of grasping. Instead, you'll have moments of grace where everything aligns effortlessly, followed by periods where you find yourself struggling against currents again. This is natural. The practice is not about achieving some permanent state of flow, but about gradually learning to recognize when you're in resistance and gently returning to alignment. In meditation, you practice this return again and again. When you notice your mind has wandered into planning or remembering, you gently guide it back to the present moment, to the breath, to the body, to what is actually happening right now. This simple gesture of return, repeated thousands of times, trains you in the art of letting go and coming back, of releasing resistance and finding flow. The wisdom we've explored today is not new. It has been discovered and rediscovered by contemplatives in every culture and century, by anyone who has looked deeply into the nature of existence and human suffering. The Buddha found it 2,500 years ago and taught it as the path to liberation. The Taoist sages observed it in nature and encoded it in their teachings on the way. And now it's available to you, right here, right now, in this very moment. You don't need to travel to distant monasteries or spend years in retreat to begin practicing these teachings. You can start exactly where you are. The next time you notice yourself clinging to an identity that feels confining, you can practice letting go of ego. When you feel the urge to compete or prove yourself superior, you can remember the humility of the sea. When you're rushing and forcing outcomes, you can pause and ask what effortless action might look like. When change arrives and you want to resist it, you can breathe and practice acceptance. When comparison steals your peace, you can return to gratitude for what you have. And when self-criticism arises, you can offer yourself the compassion you would give a friend. These practices, simple as they sound, have the power to transform your entire experience of being alive. Not through dramatic conversion or sudden enlightenment, but through the gradual softening that comes from releasing resistance and learning to flow. You become more flexible, more resilient, more at peace. You discover that you've been carrying burdens that were never yours to carry, fighting battles that were never necessary, pursuing destinations that were never as important as the journey. Life will continue to bring challenges, losses, disappointments, and pain. The teachings don't promise immunity from difficulty, but they do promise this. When you learn to flow with, rather than against life's movements, you suffer less and live more fully. You find that peace is possible even in turbulent circumstances, that joy can coexist with sorrow, that you can be deeply engaged with life while holding it all lightly. The invitation remains before you. Will you continue clinging to the banks, trying to control the uncontrollable, or will you release your grip and trust the current? Will you exhaust yourself in resistance, or will you discover the grace of alignment? The river is already flowing. You don't need to make it flow. You only need to stop fighting against it and let yourself be carried by wisdom that is older and deeper than any individual understanding. As you move forward from this moment, carry these teachings lightly. Don't turn them into another set of rules to follow or achievements to accomplish. Instead, let them be like seeds planted in your awareness, watering them with attention and patience, trusting that understanding will blossom in its own perfect time. And when you forget, as you surely will, remember that forgetting and returning is itself the practice. Each return is a small liberation, a gentle release, another moment of flowing with, rather than against, the great river of life. May you discover the peace that comes from letting go. May you find the grace that emerges from flowing with life rather than fighting against it. May you know yourself not as a separate, defended ego, but as a dynamic, interconnected process participating in the vast dance of existence. And may you trust that when you stop trying to control the river, it will carry you exactly where you need to be. In this trust, in this flow, may you find your way home to the peace that was always here, waiting beneath the surface of resistance, available in every breath, present in this very moment. The river flows on, constant in its change, perfect in its imperfection, teaching us moment by moment the art of letting go and living fully. If these reflections have touched something in you, we invite you to deepen your practice of flowing with life. Share this wisdom with someone who might benefit from these teachings. Leave a comment below sharing your own experiences with letting go and finding flow. And consider subscribing to continue this journey together exploring the profound insights that Buddhist wisdom offers for living with greater peace, clarity, and compassion in our challenging modern world. The river awaits. Let us flow together toward the vast ocean of understanding,